Welcome back everyone to the program. We're now moving into episode 7, which is all about getting to grips with data strings. Now the aim of this episode is to introduce you to some of the functions that you can use to do a lot of string extraction and interrogation. So basically, when you have a long string of characters, there are specific functions you can use to manipulate those strings and extract the bits and pieces that you need out of those in certain situations. So part 1 will be covering the extraction methods and how to interrogate strings. In part 2, we'll be looking at how to convert between different data types, which ones are compatible and which ones you need to do a little bit of extra conversions in order to get them to the data type you need. Lastly, in part 3, we'll be going over the two functions known as isNow and coalesce, very similar functions, but we'll be going over how to use the two and when to use isNow as opposed to coalesce and vice versa. Right then, let's head on in to SQL Server Management Studio. Okay then, here we go. Let's change that database as usual. And we'll begin with the string extraction and interrogation. So first of all, I'm going to insert this little bit of data into our sales special deals table just to show you some of the limitations with the commands that we're going to cover. Let's put that in there. There we go. So now we've got 3 rows to play around with in our special deals table. Fantastic stuff. So first of all, what if you wanted to bring back a certain amount of characters from a string? Say you have the string here and you want to bring back the first 3 letters, the first 3 characters in that string there. Well, you can easily do it using the left command right here. So all you need to do is simply say left, open your brackets, put in the column that you want to extract the 3 characters from, put in your comma, and lastly put in your 3 there. So that's the amount of characters you want to return on the left of this string here in that column. Close it off with your color, with your round brackets again, and then we can rename the column. So all of these are from the table here, colors warehouse. We've got the color name, etc. So let's have a look at what we get out of that. There you go. So we've got all the colors on the left, and you can see that they are a variety of different lengths within the characters. Here blue is 4 letters, here is black is 5, etc. Chartreuse is a very long string, and all we're getting here is the left 3 characters. Now as you can see, we've got a couple here, both beginning with CHA. So if you were to use these as a unique type of code, you can see that we've got a problem there. And even if we use the first 4 characters, then we'll have CHAR. So again, we've got an issue with uniqueness there. So if we went for 5 characters instead, simply change that to 5. We'll execute that, and maybe you're getting something a bit more unique. However, here you go, you've got dark and then a space, so this color code here will be dark space, and again with that. So you can see some of the issues you get with bringing back just the left, a few characters, if you're trying to make things unique. But there may be situations, and I've used the left command on many occasions myself in my coding, so it is a very useful function to use to remember going forward. Now we can also take the right amount of characters from a string of data. So we're going to look at the special deals, this particular table here, and we're going to pull the right hand 9 characters from the deal description. So let's have a look at that table. Here's our deal description. So we're pulling the right hand 9, working from the right at the end of the string, back towards the left, 9 characters worth. Let's have a look at that. And there you go. So we're pulling 9 characters. Wingtip is 7 characters in length. The space is another character, remember that. And then the B is the 9th character. So we've got B wingtip. Tailspin, 8 characters plus the space. You can see it's slightly indented. And front prop is 9 characters in total. So that pulls across perfectly there. But you can see that while these functions are quick and easy to select the right or left amount of characters you want, it can be very limited in what it returns if these values in these strings are highly variable. So that's the right and the left, pretty straightforward. And next, what you can also do is use 2 together. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull the right 9 characters, then from what I have resulting from that bit of code there, I'm just simply going to pull the left 3 from that. I'll put in the right 9 there as well, just as a comparison, and we'll show you what's going on there. So here was the right 9, you can see, and the left 3 of that is B space W. There you have it. That's a space TA, and that's FRO from front prop. So basically all we're doing there is simply passing in one function to get the right 9, effectively this slot here, and then we're taking the left 3 out of that. So it will be the B space W there, space TA, and FRO there. So you can double up your functions like that, and in fact you can keep on going with as many left, right, etc. as you need to use. Now again, although I haven't used this all that often, I do sometimes need to use these sort of combinations of picking up bits and pieces from a character string. There and now, what happens if you want to pull a values or a set of values from somewhere in the middle of a string? Well, you use the substring value itself. And it works very similarly. You open your brackets there, you put in the column that you want to pull the bit of data from, and then comma, and your first value there is where you want it to start looking from. So that'll be 5 characters in, and then you put your comma again, and that'll be 3 characters to the right of that substring. So go along the string 5 characters and pull the next 3 characters from there. Close off your brackets, we're going to name it as that, and let's have a look at what we get. As you can see, what we were after there was to get the first and the second and the third, and we managed to pull the first and the second alright, because we went across 5 characters, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we took 3 from there, so it's 1, 2, 3. But, however, we came a cropper there when we went to this last one here, because the length is slightly different there. So 5 characters in is RD, is the R in the RD there. We pull the RD and the space. So once again, we are sort of stuck with that sort of variable character length string, and trying to pull hard values from that can be quite tricky. However, again, I've used this several times and it can be quite useful in certain situations. So don't discount these functions. They can be very useful to you going forwards. Right then, let's have a go at these functions here. The scenario is that a new ordering system is being implemented, but it uses a 4-letter code to denote a country. What you need to do is extract each country in the database and put the first 4 letters of the country name as a code next to each one. Then what we'll do is, once we've got that code and we've got the data, we'll forward it on to the people setting up the ordering system. Now, looking at your functions that you can use to pull these characters, there's actually 2 different functions you can use in this situation. One's pretty straightforward and obvious, the other one maybe not so obvious. So if you want to give them a go, make sure you can get the one quite easily. Don't worry if you can't get both, because we will be going over the answer from my perspective in a second. Right then, pause it to give it a go, otherwise we'll crack on with the answers. So, we're after each country in the database, so let's find out where our countries are stored. Wide world importers, and we've got application countries there. Fantastic, let's just bring that in. Application countries. Now let's see what the data looks like. Here we go, so we've got our country name there. Now they've already given us an ISO Alpha 3 code there, but we have a special bespoke system and we want the first 4 characters there. So we're looking at the country name column. Country name, there we go. And we just want the first 4 letters. So we'll just simply put the left command there. And we're going to call it country code for that. Fantastic, let's have a look at that. There you can see it's pulling off the first 4. Here we go, non-unique, but hey, that's what they asked for, and that's what they're going to get from us. Brilliant stuff. So that's one way to do it. The second way that we can do that is with the substring. And all we're doing with the substring is simply going 1 character along and pulling the 4 from starting at that first character. So we're going to call it 2, and let's see what we get. There you go, exactly the same values there. So, 2 different ways of achieving the same thing. How did you go on that? Pretty simple, straightforward, and you can see 2 ways of doing it there. Right then, let's move on, and we're going to have a look at the len function. Now len is short for length, so all we're doing here is we're going to return how many characters are in each row according to what is in the deal description. So if we want to know how many characters are in there, in that string, we'll use the len command. All you do, open and close brackets like that. As you can see, it returns an integer, so there'll be a number denoting how many characters are in the string, each string within this column. Let's have a go at that. And there you go. So that's 23 characters long in total, and you got 24 and 24 in there. So pretty straightforward. What can this be used for then? Why is this a useful little function? Well, say for example, you are building a table based off these deal descriptions and you wanted to know the maximum length that you can have, basically the longest string in there, so that when you create your new table, you make sure that the length of your varchar is at the maximum or slightly above. Well, you can use the min and max commands as well. Again, those are aggregate functions that we'll be looking into a bit more in a later episode, but we can simply use the min and the max along with our len function there, with our column there, and that'll show us the minimum string length in the entire table for that column and the maximum string length again for the entire column within that table. Let's give it a go. There you go. As we saw above, we had 23 there. That was our smallest value, which is our minimum, and 24 is our greatest value, which is our maximum there. So you can use that to find out the maximum or the minimum length of a column based on the data within it. Another great function that I use quite regularly is the replace function. So say for example you wanted to look for a certain string within your column itself and you want to then replace that with something else. So as you can see here, we're replacing HTTP, that is only if it finds it within this column, and we're going to replace it with HTTPS in there. So that's a single change. Pretty straightforward and easy enough. Now you can also do multiple replaces on the same column itself. So here we're doing our first replace. Remember, the syntax is important because you first replace with the open brackets. You've got the column, comma, what you're looking for, comma, what you want to replace it with there, and close the brackets. And then when you put your next replace with the open brackets, it'll still be using that column there, but you just need to put what you're looking for after the comma there, another comma, and what you want to change it to. So that's a multiple change, all on the same row there. Now you can also just simply remove some strings or set of characters by simply saying, here's what I'm looking for, and then you put 2 single quotation marks there, and that just says replace it, remove it completely, and put nothing in its place. And again, you can do it with multiple replaces. So we're getting rid of that, with putting nothing there, and we're also getting rid of the .com with nothing there as well. We'll be using sales customers table to illustrate this example, just pulling the top 10 for you to see what's going on. Let's run that off and you'll see exactly what is going on. So the first one was a single change, HTTP, you can see here, that simply changes HTTPS, pretty straightforward. Next one was a multi-change, HTTPS, HTTP to change to HTTPS, and we changed the .com to .co.uk over there. Pretty straightforward. So no matter how many times it's within the string or where it is, it's going to replace it. Lastly, we were wanting to strip out the HTTP : // as you can see, the beginning 7 characters of that string there, and here's the single remover, completely stripped it out there. And last, we had the multi-remove, where we also wanted to get rid of the .com as well. So we stripped out the entire bits and pieces that turn it into a URL, and we're just left with the bit in the middle there. So we stripped out quite a lot there within our multi-removal bit of replace code there. So replace can be a very useful function, especially when you're cleaning up some strings before you ingest them into another SQL statement. Lastly, for these simple straightforward functions are the upper and lower functions themselves. Now all the upper's doing is it'll take this whatever string is inside this column here and change it into uppercase. Lower will do the same but in lowercase, and that's every single value in there. So let's run that off, execute that. As you can see, everything's in uppercase there and everything's in lowercase there. Now unfortunately there's no way to turn something like this or this back into the normal form here, unfortunately. However, I'm sure there are some functions out there that some people have built that can do just that. But upper and lower, very simple, very straightforward to do just that, as you can see. Now a quick note when it comes to string interrogation and extraction. As a developer, your job is not to clean up strings that come in. If you're asked to supply a set of data, then you extract that data and send it on. You may have to do some tiny bit of tidying up, but it's not your responsibility to clean up the dodgy code that's coming out of a source system. If the data is looking bad, then it's up to the people who manage that source system to clean up the data on their end. And I've been in companies where they've had massive data cleansing exercises where they take everything from a specific table, strip it right back, clean it all up, standardize it, and they go forward from there. So if someone says to you, oh, can you just clean this data up? That is not your job at the end of the day. You just simply extract data, send it out to the people who want it. We've got a couple more scenarios to work on here with using some of this functionality that we've covered up here. So let's have a look at those. First scenario then is your company has created a new e-com website, but the suppliers table is not working properly. Apparently the postal address line 1 data is not correct. So they've asked you to write a query to bring back the supplier ID and the postal address line 1 without the PO box bit at the beginning. And the apps team will then use this corrected information to update the locations on their website. So let's have a look at that and see how we go. If you want to give it a try, please do. Simply pause the video, and when you're ready, we'll crack on with my answer. So let's start from, and which table are we looking at? Supplier ID and the postal address line 1. So that's probably looking to me like it's coming from the supplier table. Let's drag that in. Whoa, crazy there. Let's have a look at that. Let's see what's going on. There's quite a bit of information. Here we go. We've got a delivery address. We've got a postal address, line 1. There you can see a lot of PO boxes going in there. So they want us to strip out the PO box. How do we do that? We simply put our replace on there. So they want the supplier ID, and we're going to replace the postal address line 1 that's the right column, and we're looking for PO Box, and we're going to replace it with nothing. We're going to call it postal address. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward to me. Pretty straightforward and easy. Of course, we need to check our code before we send it off. So let's have a look at that. Right, you'll notice there's quite an indent there. So there's a space at the front of all of those. And look at that. What's going on there? We didn't get rid of all the PO boxes. And that's probably because there might be a couple of spaces between the PO and the box there. So we need to take that into account. So we'll probably need to do a multiple replace. Now, one thing to note is that it's case insensitive. So we could put PO box like so, and it'll still pick it up and strip it out. So let's do our second replace. First of all, we need to get rid of that space at the beginning, or should I say at the beginning of the digits, but at the end of the PO box. And we'll copy that, put that there, and it's got two spaces in there, and we want to just simply get rid of it. So we're doing a multi-removal process here to clean that up a little bit. Execute that. As you can see, we haven't got the space there, and that dodgy PO box is gone there, simply because it had two spaces in there. But we managed to get rid of them with doing our replaces there. Now you can have as many replaces as you want in the same line to achieve your goal. That's pretty much it for that first simple task there. How did you all go? I'm sure you got similar results to myself. Let's move on then to the second scenario. Now, while the apps team has successfully corrected the data in the website, it is still not working for some unknown reason. I suppose that's IT for you. After further analysis, they've come back to you with a new fix. What they're after is the postal city from the same table and replacing the PO box at the beginning of the postal address line string with the string post box and a little colon there. Now we also need to ensure all the spaces are removed. So if you want to give that a try, then please pause the video, and when you're ready, we'll then crack on with my solution to that. What I'm going to do then is simply copy the query up here. That'll start us off and get us only. So first of all, we're after the postal city ID. So let's change that round. Is it alright? Yeah, it's happy with that. So that column exists in suppliers there. So we need our postal address there, and we need to put in postbox there. And get rid of all the spaces. Now I'm going to do it in a specific way where I can do it in just two replaces on the line. You may have taken more to get your answer, but the key thing is to get the same answer. So let's have a look at that. I'm firstly going to get rid of all the spaces. There's a space there, replace it with nothing. Now, if I get rid of all the spaces in the first pass, the first replace, that means that our PO box will end up looking like this without a space as well, because I've removed all the spaces in the first replace there. So the second replace, we'll be looking for PO box as all one word. There won't be a space at the end of it because that's been replaced as well, and we want to replace it with this little string here. It's post box. So fantastic stuff. We're almost there. There's our postal city ID. Let's have a whirl. Let's see if this works. when we run it off. And there you have it. Here's your postal city ID and your post box with the colon and your post PO code there. All the way down, you see it's fixed. No issues, no problems or dramas with that one. So, pretty straightforward again with the second one. And it doesn't matter how you achieved that same aim, just as long as you got the same results. That's it for simple string functions. There's a few that we covered, a few simple ones, pretty straightforward ones. So that's it for this video. We're going to move on and look at changing data types and using data types within strings, etc. on the next video. Until then everyone, I hope you all have a fantastic day.